Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss Rishi Sunak's latest press conference on the Rwanda plan, where he seems to have suggested that the general election is going to be in July, late July. Came as something of a surprise, as I didn't think Sunak was interested in a summer election. And what's this, you may be saying? Hang on a minute, Phil. The press conference was about his Rwanda plan and how he was going to be getting multiple flights into the air a month. Precisely. He announced a July election. Or shall we say heavily hinted at one? Might be a bit confusing, let me explain. First of all, even if Sunak gets his bill through Parliament, whether today or whenever, and it indeed allows him to send at least some asylum seekers to Rwanda, it's not possible to send multiple flights a month unless there's only like a couple of refugees on each flight. But that would look pathetic and opening up to ridicule by Reform UK, apart from anyone else, as well as some sections of the media. So although I don't think we'd expect any plane to be full, there will surely have to be a decent number of refugees on board a flight in order for Sunak to have any credibility. People already sort of know that this is costing now over £500 million. The idea of watching an image of like 3 people being led onto a plane for Rwanda is going to impress nobody at all. First of all, the Rwanda agreement requires that flights cannot be sent without the authority of the Rwandan government, and it happens in a couple of phases. So the process begins with, in the agreement, that the UK government sends the Rwandan authorities some details of the asylum seekers they're sending their way. This process takes up to 2 weeks. That is according to the agreement itself. Once Rwanda has accepted this list of people, there's then another phase before any flight can take off, where the UK government then has to provide more detailed information, including medical information, other personal details, which aren't included in that first phase of the bureaucracy. Now, I don't know how long that takes, but surely that will take like a few days at least to be all signed off. Essentially, there's a load of red tape, all clearly laid out in the agreement, which I'll link below, which takes time. So the idea of being able to carry out this process multiple times a month seems somewhat unlikely. Second, there isn't very much accommodation for these refugees at the other end. As was recently reported, the vast majority of the homes which have been built with our money have been sold to local Rwandans. And because the agreement requires that this accommodation be made available to the refugees, the numbers we can send are limited to the number of homes that Rwanda hasn't actually sold to its own people, which, according to reports, is a few dozen. So again, the idea of sending multiple flights a month from July, assuming there'd be a decent number of asylum seekers on each flight, it's beyond simply unlikely at this point. It's bordering on impossible. Also consider that Rwanda has the right to reject anyone. It's obviously not going to put itself out by accepting loads at a time. They already have the bulk of the money. They don't need to bend over backwards from this point on. Finally, we had the recent reports of Home Office officials openly saying that they knew that sending multiple flights is going to be impossible. They know that no matter what happens with the legislation, that won't happen. They know that ministers know that. The plan, as the Home Office understands it, is to get one flight in the air of asylum seekers who are going to have the weakest legal case against it as what they call a proof of concept, then call the election. That's what Home Office officials involved in this thing. And all of this is without even mentioning legal challenges. Right? Sunak keeps talking about ignoring judgments from the European Court of Justice. But, I mean, even if he managed to bypass them, the British courts have had a thing or two to say about things as well. So the idea that there could be multiple flights a month is for the birds, metaphorically and literally. So Sunak has claimed something will happen that he knows cannot possibly happen. But if he gets one flight in the air, and there aren't multiple a month, he will be asked why. Can't blame Labour, the courts, or the woke blob. Because if he gets one flight in the air, then clearly the public will expect him to do several as promised, or the public that want these flights in the air. So this leaves 2 realistic possibilities for Sunak's plan, I suppose. or fairly obvious ones. The first is that he never gets a single flight in the air, and he just carries on blaming Labour, the courts and the woke blob while he works on his India trade deal. My problem with this possibility is that today he announced that the flights will begin in 10 to 12 weeks. So Sunak is already breaking his promise, because he promised that they'd be taken off in spring. Well, this is, well into summer. Why would it take this long if he expects the legislation to pass into law this week? Legal challenges? He says he's going to bypass those. Why not announce the flights will be in the air as early as next month if the Lords behaves itself, and then go back to blaming them when it doesn't happen? If he didn't think he'd be able to get any flights in the air, surely that would make more sense. I don't get why he's claiming that even if the law is passed this week, he needs another 3 months to implement it when he reckons everything else is ready. But then we do have to remember that Sunak is a strategic idiot, so just because something doesn't make sense doesn't mean he isn't planning it. Second big possibility is in line with the reports of what Home Office officials are being told, that Sunak does expect to be able to send some asylum seekers. So he can get a flight in the air, as I discussed recently. The plan is to pick ones which would have the weakest legal case against deportation to Rwanda, get them on a flight, wave it off, invite Suella Braverman to wave it off, get the pictures, then immediately have the election. Although this would have to be adjusted slightly, because let's look at the scenario. So 10 to 12 weeks, that means Sunak expects to get a flight in the air early to mid-July. Now, I've already seen some legal experts casting doubt even on that time frame, but let's say that's what he's aiming for, right? So let's say he waves the flight off, then calls the election. So when's the election going to happen? Can't realistically happen in August because people are on holiday. So he could time the election for September. But then he will still find a lot of Tory activists will have been on holiday and not out door knocking during what will be an election campaign over the arse end of July and August. They're not going to go door knocking for this daft Herbert over summer. Also, his own MPs won't be impressed with pissing away their own holiday plans. So let's say he waits until September to even call the election, so then the election happens in October. Well, then he'll expose the fact that there are no more flights taken off when he promised multiple a month. So he gets a flight off mid-July and then there's like nothing across the whole of summer. That's not a great lead into the election. A third possibility, I suppose, as an outside chance, as soon as Sunak knows he can get a flight going, he could call the election. So if he thinks the first flight will be mid-July at the latest, call the election in June for late July. Now, the only issue with that is, would Purdah allow reporters to report that a flight has taken off 1 or 2 weeks before the election? Let us assume that they would be allowed to at least comment on that, as long as they're not making too much of a meal of it. So the Conservatives could get the news out that a flight has gone off. That's a possibility. And surely that would be the most likely, therefore, because it allows you to have the election straight away after a flight has taken off. And there people never actually see that the other ones aren't going. Because Labour will be in power then, and they're quite happy to say, yeah, we're just stopping this. And Sunak can say, oh, well, I was going to have multiple. It was all set up, and then Labour just stopped it. Finally, it's worth noting that Sunak has yet again emphasised that this policy is all about stopping the boats. Another sign that he does not intend to actually implement the Rwanda plan very far ahead of the election. Because even if the Rwanda plan was actioned exactly as Sunak is claiming, including multiple flights a month, which is actually impossible, it will make no difference to boat crossings. How could it? In fact, interestingly, as I understand it, the government, with its asylum policy, have to treat asylum seekers who arrived before, say, I think it was some date last summer, differently to the ones who've arrived since, to the point where asylum seekers arriving via small boats now are in a sort of limbo, so they can't even be considered for the Rwanda plan. So this is only for legacy asylum seekers anyway, as far as I can tell. And also, like, the deterrent effect, even if we were sending some new arrivals, is non-existent. Like either they're going to know about the Rwanda plan, in which case they will know that there's a tiny, tiny chance they'll be sent to Rwanda, and probably a 0% chance, in which case it's not a deterrent. Or no one will tell them about it because why would they? And it still makes no difference. I mean, Sunak knows this, cleverly knows this. No, I think it's this simple. Either Sunak doesn't believe he's going to get any flights in the air ever, in which case this is all a misguided attempt at a wedge issue, or he does expect to get one flight in the air, after which he needs the election to happen before people start wondering where the rest of the flights are. And if he really does think a flight takes off in early to mid-July, then I think late July for the election. Now, that's not without risk, with activists having holiday booked, but the risk of a flightless summer and record boat crossings is surely greater. So funny old day. At the weekend, I said I wasn't convinced by the arguments for a summer election. Now I'm thinking, I'm not so sure now. I think Sunak may have just called one. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.